Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Shawn and David again here for Transformation Leaders Podcast. And today I am going to interview my colleague Shawn, who has a very interesting topic that he has written a blog post about. And we wanted to go ahead and share that with you. So to get started, I am going to put this link up here. You can just scan it with your phone and it'll take you directly into the blog. And then I'm also going to do a screen share so that we can kind of follow along, and we'll have a point of reference here if I can get my computer to play nice with me. All right, so we've got that. I'll leave this link on the screen for a little while, and then we'll move that off. So Shawn, if you are ready to begin, let's talk a little bit about thought leaders and the blog post that you wrote and some of the graphics. We'll go into that, but I guess let's start with some of the inspiration to what led to this document being written on your blog.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a colleague who was saying about thought leadership, and that they just wish there were more thought leaders. And I felt it was very interesting in that, grass is always greener on the other side. Thought leaders, innovators, visionaries, it's all the same. People have this expectation that these people are bestowed a title, when it's nothing can be further than the truth. It's about being obsessive, is running into a problem so often that you have to solve it. You have to get everybody on the same page to solve it. And it's one of the reasons why I am such a big believer in transformers and innovators, because they need all the help they can get. Sometimes you carry a lot on your shoulders, and sometimes people look at it, what you're doing, as it's so easy. And again, very difficult to be an innovator in the world today.
That's definitely true. One of the things that, at least that I see, even with leaders, and they have, I think everybody has the ability to be a thought leader. It's just that, I guess as the saying goes, you can't see the forest through the trees. And it's your paradigm or perspective of what you're focused on in that moment. And if you're so hyper-focused in that one particular area, you kind of miss that big picture. So I always like to encourage folks to take a more of a 50,000 foot view approach, or a litmus test every so often, like come up to the surface and breathe and just kind of do a reality check. And then all of a sudden, those ideas will start to germinate. And then talk it over with your team. Like, what are some suggestions that you would have for either people that are either thought leaders themselves, or for those that are just regular leaders but need to incorporate more thought leadership into their, into their practice, into what it is that they do at their work or jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. And it also comes down to skill sets, right? So just because you have an idea, or even a good idea, doesn't mean you're a thought leader. Being able to present that idea and let people know that, hey, this is the problem I'm trying to solve, and here's how I want it to be solved. And I think we together as a group can solve it in this way. And it's all about making sure that there's room in the boat for everybody.
Yep.
A lot of people fail to recognize this. There's a lot of people out there who think that thought leaders are people who are just really, really smart, and they're really, really opinionated. It's not about having an opinion. It's about trying to solve problems and helping the mass, the team, get to a point where they know, hey, this is a really good idea. We should all do it.
Yep.
And part of that is communication.
Yes.
That's the part that people get really hung up on, is like, I have a great idea, but I have a hard time presenting it. Well, if you can't tell people what you're thinking and present it in such a way where your mother can understand it, you need to do some real soul searching and ask yourself, is this a problem that people actually care about? And if they do, you should talk to people about why they care about it so that you can relate and make it relatable to everybody else you talk to. So, very important.
No, I definitely agree with that. And so, along the lines of communication, if you start thinking about in terms of even content creation, when you're, you know, creating type of external marketing and content, that communication goes a long way, because I think a lot of times the way that marketing content is derived or put together, especially at these large Fortune 100 and 500 companies, there's so many people involved, so many departments, something seems to always get lost in the translation. And so either the group that is in control of whatever it is that's being marketed, and then the marketing team that is there to promote it, and then the salespeople that are there to answer questions and service the client, there always seems to be something lost in that. So what would you suggest are some approaches, either internally and or externally, to kind of make this more cohesive, unified, make the experience for the client ultimately better? Because CX is ultimately where everybody should be focused. And by fixing or cleaning up some ideas or some issues that are going on inside of your house could potentially have big implications downstream, especially into revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, I find it easier to get people in the boat when they understand what the boat is and why we're trying to cross the river together on this boat, right? So communication, as I talked about before, so important. Being able to understand that it's worthy getting across the river. A lot of people are like, hey, I want to solve a problem, and that problem is 10 years in the future. A lot of people, hey man, corporate America is very much about the quarter. You have some really good visionaries out there who are seeing a year forward, 18 months forward, right? But most importantly, if you want to be relatable, you have to understand what's going on in people's lives. You have to talk to people. You need to have a network. You need to make sure you understand what everybody's incentives are, because there's a reason why corporate America sets incentives for everybody, right? It makes it very easy for alignment to happen and they get the outcome that the company wants to happen. And this happens in your company. This happens on all your customers' company. And for most people, just individual consumers, they have agendas too. Asking them and having solutions to their problems is really the start of any kind of transformation. And any vision you have has to be associated to an outcome, either for the consumer, your corporate customers, or your internal colleagues.
How about I'm going to be selfish here. I'm going to speak from my experience. What about solving the wrong problem? Or here's the problem that we're trying to solve, only to find out that this is a symptom of the actual root problem. So,
Elon Musk comes to mind with his Model 3 story. If you haven't heard it, please look it up. He slept on the floor to try to solve a problem that wasn't even required. He saved the company simply by deleting a business requirement that nobody really wanted. Everybody just assumed. So, I say this all the time, don't let something go unsaid.
Yep.
Personal life and professional life, right? It's important for everybody to know where everything's at so that proper problems are addressed, not the wrong problem.
Agreed. Are you familiar with? I mean, there's so many of these philosophies out there, but Toyota, I think
Mm-hmm.
it was in the 90s or the 80s, created this philosophy for helping people get to the root core analysis or root core problem. They coined it the 5 whys. Are you are you familiar?
No, no.
So the way that it works is you come up with whatever you think the problem is. And then it's called the 5 whys because you essentially ask, well, why is this problem the problem? Like, how do we identify it? That's layer one. And you go through this again and again and again, 5 layers, usually 5 layers, could be more, but typically 5 layers almost always get you to the root problem. So, for example, they had a problem in manufacturing, and so maybe instead of not hitting their numbers, let's just say that I have no idea about how many cars are supposed to be made in an assembly line. So I'm just pulling a number out of the air right now. But the problem that Toyota say is trying to solve is we need to complete 100 cars on our assembly line per day. We're falling short. We're only hitting 78. So that's the problem statement. Now, while that's a problem because it impacts revenue and it impacts delivery and customers and everything, especially if sales are going good and there's a back order of say maybe 5,000 cars, this could be a real problem for missing delivery. So you ask the first question of why. Why are we only doing 78 cars? And so you talked about the other part earlier about you got to have contacts, you got to have people to talk to. Well, this includes leadership in the business, not just colleagues outside or even
Mm-hmm.
friendly competitors, but knowing what's going on inside, having these conversations with either leadership and or just like Elon does. He goes right down onto the floor, starts talking to the assembly line worker. Hey man, what's going on? Like what happened here? And so anyway, you get to that first core problem is hey, why are we only doing 78 cars? Oh, well, that's because this widget thing over here that turns this screw or turbine is not running at 100% optimization. There was a problem with it. So we had to throttle it down so that we didn't stop the assembly line. So that's the first why. And so now the new problem that you're trying to solve is this machine that's been scaled down. Why is it scaled down? That's the second level why. So you can see this continues to chase. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the root core problem is something in finance because the time and the delay to get POs procured, issued, and done, it gets lost in the translation, or let's just say it was going to a wrong email address. And so just one stupid little thing like an improper email address, corporate data was going into an abyss, a black hole essentially. And as a result, it started backing up the assembly line like nobody
Mm-hmm.
would have ever thought. So if you try to maybe increase the speed of the assembly line, obviously you'll just break other stuff. So if companies could do a little bit more of that and talk a little bit about, how workshops could help this type of
Mm-hmm.
problem to help discover this. And again, 5 whys is just one example of many, many, many examples that are out
Mm-hmm.
there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, um, corporate culture is a very important thing. I know, you know, me and David work in a place that truly believes, solving the problem and solving it together. Um, Highly recommend that kind of approach. As leaders, you know, we all need to be thinking about the team first and understanding. And I don't know about you, but as a team leader, having one-on-ones regularly. What's going on? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? You know, doing your homework. Making sure you understand what's going on in the industry. And then uh, if you don't like talking to people, you're not a good thought leader. That's
In the wrong
if
line
you're
of work. Maybe do accounting, do something or programming.
exactly introverts really difficult to be a thought leader because it's all about trying to solve the problem together. And, a lot of people say, Shawn, for some reason you're always right. I'm like, no, I'm not. I've talked to everybody before I tell you what I think's going on.
Yep.
So, a lot of prejudgment out there is assumed to be thought leaders. But it comes down to just understanding the problem, understanding the people, and understanding the technology. And I know I've harped on this quite a few times, but business solutions have three answers: the people, the process, and the technology, in that order. If you don't have those three, it's going to be very hard to solve the problem. So, once you have, and you are this struck by lightning person, I mean, I was a founder of multiple companies, and I've been struck by lightning of what is obvious but no one is doing. It comes down to, how do you get followers, right? And I in the blog I say, let's start a cult, right? Talking to people and getting them to understand, like, hey, are we in agreement that this is a problem? Okay, here is a solution, and just asking the person, what's a better solution?
Yep.
Right? And a lot of times, telling people, hey, this is the problem and this is how you solve it, is not a way to get people to follow. You've got to make them think that they're the leader, right?
Correct.
You've got to talk to them and say, hey, do you know this problem? Is this problem affecting you?
Yep.
Do you know the technology? Is this technology interesting to you? You need to be open and talking to people. And then eventually people are like, yes, you're right. Like, I know I made a big name of myself back in the aughts around just data normalization. Like, isn't it better if you treat all these things the same? Right? That was one of the big things that back in the early aughts I was pushing. And, to this day, there's a lot of people who are like, yes, data normalization solves all ills. And now I've come full circle and say, hey, it doesn't solve every problem. So, it's important to be honest. It's important to be engaging. It's important to stay on topic. But this is how thought leaders are really in there. You get this kind of, hey, these are what I believe. This is what needs to be done. I think it can help you. Let me help you. A lot of times, thought leaders, you get confused that, hey, I'm looking for people to help me, where you get a lot more followers if you provide other people help first, right?
Yep.
And this is part of the journey that anybody who wants to be a thought leader or a visionary needs to understand.
Yep.
A, it's not about you. It's mostly about the problem. And B, it's about the people you're trying to help.
Yeah.
If you keep it in that context, you'll be far more successful than otherwise.
Yeah, I think focusing on the people is definitely a great start, because it keeps everything framed the way that it needs to be framed. If you know who you're solving the problem for, then you're trying to either enrich their experience or at least solve their pain, to at least make them a little bit more less grumpy than they could be with all of the plethora of issues that they have going on here. So I brought this graphic up to illustrate a topic and point. So for those not familiar, this is a screenshot from Power Automate. There is a snippet of functionality that most people don't know about or use it. This is called process mining, and this allows you to kind of get into that 5 why, or that root cause analysis. And as far as it relates to workshops, this, and well as many other tools that are out there that do this type of thing, help you establish a graphical representation. So in addition to having the interviews with people, you could actually monitor a process. I talked about an assembly line earlier, but this is just a data plotted example. And so you can see here's the start, here's the end, and these are your deviations along the path that have unfolded in real time. Now, here's corporate America thinks that their process, and this is, I'm doing this tongue in cheek, of course, but let's just say that regular corporate America thinks that their process goes from invoice entry. I can't read the text on these, but in any event, they think the process goes right. And then it flows its way down into here. And until they do an exercise like this, or they do a workshop, they really had no idea that there was a deviation. And not only was there a deviation, but it was the preferred path that things were taking. This could then answer many problems, such as delays, complaints, pain, whatever it may be. Now you have opportunities to go in and just say, okay, so this is what we thought. This is what's happening. Now we have different perspectives. And again, going back to what you were talking about earlier, and what I had confirmed, is that putting the person or the individual first by trying to solve their problem, you can then look at this in a more interesting way. But nonetheless, I just wanted to use this graphic as a tool to make sure that people are solving the problem. Because again, the graphic, this number 113, might be the identified problem that you're trying to solve, but the real problem might be this other path that is unfolded in some unknown way for whatever reason. And this was just a random arbitrary example of that to kind of illustrate that point. What are some additional feedback mechanisms? So talk a little bit, because I think this kind of almost goes hand in hand as a good trade-off. Talk a little bit about why you chose this graphic and what the experience was that resonated so powerful with you on that.
Yeah. If you are a business leader and you have a calling to help the business succeed, it is frustrating at times when you are pushing that boulder up the hill, trying to convert the way that we're doing things now to the way that we all agree it should be. But you still have to maintain the status quo, right? So at times, thought leaders feel like they're doing two jobs. They're working in the future and they're working in the present.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't realize that when you're trying to be that catalyst for change, and this is at every place that I've worked for, you end up working two positions. One where you believe the business needs to be, and where the business is right now. And they're equally important.
Yep.
But it's just part and parcel of there's an over glamorization of being a visionary, a thought leader, a founder. But the people who have actually done it will tell you that it is some of the hardest things to do. It's what's going to make you feel the most lonely. One of the passions that I have is really helping innovators innovate and founders found companies. And some of the best network relationships I have is with people who are on that journey right now and could use that wonderful ear to talk to. And again, it can be very lonely, but it shouldn't be.
No.
Right? A lot of people get into these positions because, they could not do it.
Yeah.
That's what the most common thing that founders, when they ask, how did you become a founder?
Yep.
Number one is because I was absolutely obsessive that this is the right way. And the second thing is I didn't know I was being a founder when I was founded. I didn't realize it.
Yep.
So, this blog was really a call out to many of the people I've talked to about how lonely it is to be a thought leader, and the delusion that other people have that it's so easy,
Yeah.
when it's very hard to make everybody agree on common sense.
I,
You know,
I think one of the things that you mentioned earlier is extremely helpful. And for those that are listening that are in leadership that may have to do some thought leadership, let's try to come up with, or let's discuss a list of traits that typically are a thought leader. For me, the top 3 that come to mind is a strong action for bias. You are essentially not very patient. You may not come across that way. Hopefully you've got some emotional intelligence to tone it down at work, but underneath, inside, it's kind of chaos because you're like, I want to do it now. I want to do it now. So that type of drive, as well as somebody who just has an insatiable thirst or curiosity that wants to know what makes things tick. Because if you don't have the ability to tear something down, again, going back to that 5 why exercise, you're going to have a really hard time or struggle with that skill. And then finally, and we talked about it already a little bit, and this little voice sitting in my head, it's like, yes, communication, communication, communication. And so one thing that you said in the last part of your segment that you were just talking about was that thought leaders work in 2 spaces, not only currently what they're working on, which is unfortunately where they communicate to others, but they're also playing a game of chess where they have 2, 3 moves into the future of short, mid, and long term. And I understand there may be situations that call or warrant for either secrecy or confidentiality or whatever it may be. But by and large, I think this is where some of the communication breakdowns happen. And if they could divulge, hey, we're also going here. Here's the goal. Here's the long term. This is why we're doing what we're doing. And this is where we want to be. And then be able to tell that story. I guess now that's 4, right? So I'll leave it there. Can you come up with 3 additional?
Oh, I don't know about additional. I highly recommend being humble.
Yep.
You know, the end of the day it isn't about being right or wrong, right? It's about the outcome.
Sure.
And, I say this at the end, where thought leader doesn't make you correct.
Yep.
Visionaries may not have any followers, and founders may not be very forward looking, right?
Yep.
But you need to have this sense of that something must be done, that bias towards action.
Yep.
And it's not about having the best ideas. It's about pulling forward everybody's best idea, right? And really being humble and understanding that when somebody else comes up with a great idea and maybe they are not the best at communicating it, readily be the follower, right?
Yep.
And jump and help them. And the more that you are correct at the end, even if it's not you be the one who coming up with the idea, that's more important than you being correct, than what you're telling people is
Yep.
correct. So again, really want to call everybody out. If you have any questions on thought leadership, I know David and myself would love to hear from you, and hit us up on LinkedIn. I have tons of other things that I talk about. One is about this podcast, as you can see. And I love to hear what other people are doing and the problems that they're trying to solve. That's why I'm in consulting.
Yep. No, excellent. All right. So if anybody is interested in reading more about Shawn and his blog, we got the link back up on the screen for you to go ahead and take advantage of that. And in addition to that blog, Shawn has a tremendous amount of content up here. So maybe of something of interest. I'm sure it's a culmination. I've gone through several of them. I've talked with Shawn, offline, off the podcast, and, all of those experiences, all that wealth of knowledge that he's accumulated over the years has made it in one way, shape, form, not all of it, but the memorable ones are out there. So highly encourage you guys to take advantage of that. And just to try to quickly get over here to give a quick plug out, this is our website at transformationleaderspodcast.com. We also have a YouTube channel, so you can come down here, you can click on the YouTube channel, and then, of course, all of the current and past podcasts are up here as well. You can find Shawn and I also on LinkedIn, so you can connect to us either way. We're out here every Wednesday, noon Eastern Standard Time, and so we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks.